Hi, welcome to Mokum Studios Instagram live session. I'm Mokum's Design Director, Stephanie Moffat.
Hi, and I'm Annie, Mokum's Product Developer, and today we welcome back Bridget.
Morning.
Bridget will be joining us for our live Q&A sessions. She has gathered numerous market questions which we will endeavour to answer this week and in next week's session as well. And we hope that these Q&A sessions provide you with a little bit more understanding and a little bit more insight into some topics that we appreciate can cause some confusion.
So before we get going, I wanted to highlight again Woven. This is an incredible resource book that we've put together as a company with over 100 years of industry knowledge. It has a huge chapter dedicated to textile testing. So we're dipping into another one today, and there's much more in here. So get your hands on a copy if you can.
Yeah, so testing provides really critical information for us throughout the development process to assess the durability, the usability, and also to assess appropriate care and maintenance instructions. We work with a really reputable external testing house based in Melbourne, and we've been working with them for a long time now, and they're really conservative with their results, but we appreciate that because it means that our products are ingrained with a real quality.
So in today's session, we're going to be talking about another one of the most important gateway tests that we put our textiles through before we release them to market, and that is of light fastness. So to start, what is light fastness? What does it mean?
Okay, so a colour fastness test will measure a textile's ability to resist or withstand fading. And fading means a change in colour, and that could be a change in hue or saturation or depth of colour. And we test a range of different colour fastness methodologies for textiles. We will test a textile's ability to withstand fading from UV light, of course, but also from washing and laundering, and as well as rubbing for upholstery textiles.
So we're going to focus on colour fastness to light, the testing and the results today. Mm-hmm. Can you please run us through a couple of other colour fastness tests that we run?
Sure. Well, colour fastness to washing and dry cleaning allows us to assess a product's suitability for these laundering methods. And what they simply do within the laboratory, within a controlled circumstance, is they replicate those methods on a much smaller scale, and then they assess the colour loss against an original sample, and then they determine a rating out of 1 to 5 against what they call the grey scale. And we're really aiming for a 4 to 5 and to assess whether something's suitable to be dry cleaned or washing.
Mm-hmm. A question that comes up a lot for us is, if a fabric is machine washable, can it be spot cleaned?
Not well. You'd think that wasn't a simple solution to make, but what we would say is always approach spot cleaning with caution due to colour loss, because the real difference is that if something's washable, we generally within Mokum specify that it should be gentle or delicate wash, and we really do prefer you to use a delicate laundry liquid. So that would mean when you're washing it, the entire cushion is being gently washed with a very low solution of detergent, where with spot cleaning it's very localized, and the cleaning can be quite aggressive to remove the stain, and that's where you can actually create colour loss. So particularly if you're using water, which we don't always recommend, or a detergent. So we would much prefer, and one of the safest things for you to do is to simply try spot cleaning with a dry white cloth, and in most cases you will remove the stain. I know that from my own experience.
Oh, cool. Okay, thanks. Back to the methodologies.
Okay, so another colour fastness test that we undergo is colour fastness to rubbing, and that's often referred to in the market as crocking as well. And this test will measure a fabric's resistance to fading or colour loss due to friction or rubbing of another fabric. And this is particularly relevant for upholstery textiles. You can imagine if you're wearing white pants and you sit down on a dark blue sofa, you want to be confident that when you stand up, your pants haven't changed colour. So essentially with this test, a white cloth is used as a standard abradant, and that is rubbed against the textile that you're testing in both wet and dry conditions. And the wet test is actually far more severe than the dry test. After the test is performed, any colour transfer onto the white cloth is assessed, and also any colour loss from the textile is also measured and assessed and analysed in the laboratory against a set of 5 grey scales. We are given a result, and that result helps us to determine the recommended usage for the upholstery textile, which level of residential application, or whether it's commercially appropriate.
And colour fastness for light for us is a really critical test. As you mentioned, it's a gateway test, and really it measures fabric's resistance to colour change or colour loss from UV light. And how that is tested within the laboratory is under controlled circumstances. A sample is taken, an original sample is taken, and that original sample is not tested. And the sample is then placed under an artificial light which replicates UV, and over a period of time it's checked for colour loss. And generally for interior textiles that is about 40 hours. And at the same time you're testing what is called a blue scale, and then the colour loss and the original sample is measured against that scale, and that's how we determine what rating to give a product, and that's what we publish.
Can you elaborate on the blue scale, because that's what we actually see on the back of our samples?
Yeah, well the term blue scale, it's really a testing card of 8 scales, which is actually blue wool samples ranging in colour from 1 through to 8. And these test cards are tested in the same environment as our sample, and there's also still an original blue scale that's not tested. And then after the period of time, the test sample and our original sample are put side by side, and then the blue scale sample and the original blue scale are reviewed, and the extent of dye loss is measured against the blue scales, and then that's what you determine the closest match to gives you the rating of the blue scale, and that is what we publish from 1 to 8 on our sample. So it's a guide on colour loss, basically.
Who determines that comparison?
The test the laboratory assistant, and they do this all the time, and they're very trained as to what is the closest match, and so they determine the result for us.
What would you say is an appropriate result, colour fastness to light test result?
So as Steph mentioned, the test uses 8 blue scales, which slowly graduate from 1 to 8. 1 would indicate a fail. It means complete colour loss. So you'll never see a 1 out of 8 on our samples. And an 8 is almost like the unicorn result. It actually doesn't exist. Even for a solution dyed outdoor product, the best result would be a 7 out of 8. So a 7 is an extremely high result. It indicates almost no colour loss or extremely minimal colour loss. Generally speaking, a 5 or greater is perfectly appropriate for drapery fabrics, and a 4 to 5 or greater is a wonderful result for upholstery.
And there's also lots of variables that can affect the result. The composition plays a role, but more importantly probably the dye stuff, the quality of dye stuff, the method of dyeing, whether it's solution or yarn or piece, whether it's printed and is it a digital print. All these things factor on a textile's ability to resist UV.
And Annie, why do you think a UV test is so critical in our part of the world?
Well, we have extremely unique environmental conditions in Australia and New Zealand, especially with regards to the amount of UV light that we have. We essentially have a hole in the ozone layer above Australia and New Zealand. So not only is the amount of light really abundant, it's also that the level of light is incredibly damaging because we don't have that ozone filter protecting us. Our lifestyle and also our mild weather impacts on our architecture. Architecturally designed homes in this part of the world take on very much transitional indoor-outdoor flow, and that often calls for large windows with a lot of glass letting in a lot of light. And so fabrics and textiles that are technically indoors, they might be sitting on the periphery of the indoors of the home, but they're still subjected to an extremely harsh level of UV light.
I've definitely come across sort of the fear of linen fading.
Yeah, absolutely. And we understand that, but unfortunately pretty much everything fades. From the exterior of your home, your bricks, your paint, your timber, your you, as the old lady at the table. But we've just mentioned that dye methods and quality of dye is really critical. That's for us is one of the most important things you can do at a development level. In general, though, synthetic fibres will receive a better UV resistant than natural fibres, with acrylic being the best, followed closely by polyester. But linen and cotton, if dyed with really great dye stuff and good finishing process, can also get a really good result. You know, we sometimes see a 6. But having the best, of course, is solution dyed, and solution dyed acrylic, solution dyed olefin, solution dyed polyolefin are fibres that we like to work with for outdoor, indoor-outdoor high-performance textiles. We're going to go into that in a future IG Live session because it's a really big, important part of our brand, and the dye method is quite different.
So what tips and tricks do you have to extend the lifespan of your textiles in relation to UV damage?
One of the most effective ways to protect your interior soft furnishings is to use a superior quality lining. And Bridget, you definitely talk to this product category in the market a lot, far more than Steph or I. So if you could shed some light on the different types of linings, that would be awesome.
Would love to. So depending on the specifics and the requirements for the space that you need, we've got so many different linings in the range. One is a triple weave or a dim out, which as the name suggests dims out light. It's got a really soft, almost spongy like texture, and that comes down to the way it's constructed, the weave. And it's commonly machine washable and fire retardant, so it makes it a great selection for commercial. We also have coated linings, so that ranges from 1 pass right up to 3 pass. 3 pass giving you complete block out. So that gives you complete light control of a room. So if you have a certain requirement, you know, you're a shift worker or children's bedrooms or media rooms, that's a fantastic product for that too. And obviously not only protecting against UV exposure, it also gives you insulation too, so it's a massive win-win.
Yeah, absolutely. So another trick or tip for minimizing UV damage is that to bear in mind that the leading edge of your curtain, which is the part of the curtain closest to the window, that's obviously the most exposed part of your curtain and therefore the most vulnerable part to UV damage and degradation. So a great maintenance tip is to periodically, if you can, especially if you have 2 curtains, to swap your curtains over, moving the leading edge to sit against the wall. This will extend the lifespan of your curtains, but it's also a great way of just hiding damage. If you haven't done it and you do have damage in your leading edge,
Evening it out.
rather than having to completely replace them, you can just hide the damage by swapping them.
And the same really applies for upholstery, because within a space you can have direct UV light and indirect UV light, and that comes from reflecting off surfaces. Pools can create reflection, or water nearby, and the same approach really is moving your upholstered pieces around the room, much like you'd rotate an area rug. Also, you can then swap the cushions on the actual piece of furniture, and a good time to do that is during your regular vacuuming and maintenance of the sofa, and that allows you to just even out not only the wear but even out the UV loss over the entire piece of furniture. Great, and it'll fade much more gracefully.
I think one of the most important considerations to take away from this is actually just to have that conversation with your team, with your clients, with your industry people, because I know it's not very sexy, but it's very much our reality. So, and I think that goes hand in hand with managing customer expectations. Each
Communication.
customer is going to have a unique environment. They're going to have expectations of design and functionality. And taking that into consideration, you know, how much light in your beautiful architectural home is coming in. Is there a pool nearby? Polished concrete floors, north facing, south facing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's all really important.
It's definitely exactly that, having a dialogue around client expectations, and for the client to have a thorough understanding of the care and maintenance required for that particular textile and for that home and for their home. Just like you would need to care for your silk clothing or your woolen clothing, the same applies for interior soft furnishings. They are fabric, they need to be cared for appropriately, your furniture and also your curtains as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we would say don't install and then ignore. So thank you so much, Bridget, for coming along today, and we'll see you again for our next one, where we are going to be deep diving the exciting topic of pilling and seam slippers.
So that is Tuesday the 29th, same time, same place.
Kia kaha, stay safe.
Thank you.
Bye.
Yeah.